The last P that we're going to discuss in relation to the 4 Ps is promotion. But what actually promotion entails? So there are many things that falls under the P of promotion. Advertising, product placement, sales promotion, direct marketing, public relationships, personal selling, and even trade shows. In this session, we will go over some of them in more details than others. So advertising is any paid form of non-personal presentation and promotion of ideas, goods, or services. So it can fall under a broadcast, it can be print, like in newspapers, it can be online, like digital, it can be outdoor, like on buses or on billboards, it can be displays within a store, and it can be live demonstrations. Sales promotion is the short-term incentive to encourage a purchase of a sale or a product. So sales promotion is when I want the consumer to make a direct purchase. It usually will come at the end of a campaign. Examples of sales promotion can be discounts, it can be coupons, it can be displays, and it can be demonstrations. All of those, their purpose and objective is to make a purchase. Public relations, on the other hand, involves building good relations between the company and the public, the target market. And the idea then is that we don't expect a direct purchase because of a public relation. We do expect to build a brand image, a brand positioning, to help differentiate us from our competition. Examples of a public relation are press releases, sponsorships, for example, when there's a sports event, special events that are done by the brand, and also web pages online can be good PR. Personal selling is when the personal representative of a firm's sales force comes to the client to actually pitch a product. This more likely will happen in a B2B than in a B2C. So in this case, the personal selling can create a sales presentation, or they can have a booth in a trade show, or they can have incentive programs that will encourage the organization to work with this specific company and not with another. Direct marketing is when we're making a direct connection with the targeted individual consumer to obtain an immediate response, which is a purchase, as well as cultivate lasting customer relationship. One of the good examples of direct marketing can be when a company sends you a catalog of their products. In today's world with the internet, that will be the emails, promotions, and suggestions about new events and new products that the company sells us. One of the major things when we talk about advertising is to understand the communication process. The communication process starts with the sender. The sender of the communication in marketing will be the company. The receiver of that communication will be the end consumer. Now, there are a few stages between the message that is sent and receiving the message. The first one is encoding. The reason why the communication needs to be encoded is because a company cannot just tell you, please buy my product because it is the best. No consumer will buy a product based on that statement. So the company has to create a nice commercial and an ad that shows why there is a problem, why the consumer should be motivated to buy their product, and sometimes why is their product better than competition. They actually encode then the message of, please buy my product, in that kind of scenario. Now, in order for the consumer to understand that encoding, they should be able to decode the message. So one of the big challenges in the communication process is to make sure that the target market actually understands what was the message you were trying to send. So being creative in your commercials and ads is important because it grabs attention. However, it can also be a downfall if it's too creative and consumers don't really understand what you're trying to tell them. Another big challenge is the media. How do we actually send the message out? We can use, as you saw, television. We can use a billboard. We can use a newspaper. We can use the internet. How do we know which media will expose our message to the consumer? If you remember when we talked about the perception process, exposure to the stimuli is one of the most important things when you want them to understand and interpret a message. So we need to understand the media habits of our target market. We need to understand where does our target market spend most of its time. Is it online? Is it in social media platforms? Is it reading the newspaper? Is it watching specific ads on specific TV shows where we can place ads in? Is it on the road, so we should put billboards? Now, in addition to that, we also have to fight the noise. Remember, when we talked about perception, we have exposure, but we also have attention. How can we tell if our target market pays attention? So we want to make sure we reduce the noise when they are exposed to our commercial. Now, it's not as easy to do since we have no control over the environment. So hence, we want to make sure that our promotion pops out, that it attracts their attention, it's unique, and it's different than what competition is doing. Then we want to see, well, what is the response? The response is not always increase in sales. Sometimes it is, like in direct sales, but sometimes it is just a change in attitude or a change in beliefs. And then we get the feedback and we see if we did a good job and we start the process all over again. So how then do we develop an effective marketing communication? So I kept saying that we need to fit it with the target audience. Now it's important to understand the difference between a target audience and a target market. A target market will be the consumers my company serves. They are the one who will buy my product. A target audience will be those that will be exposed to my promotion. Sometimes the target audience is exactly the target market, but sometimes the target audience is a subgroup of the target market. So the target audience will be the current users or potential buyers, decision makers, or those who are the influencers. So the target market will affect those 5 things: what will be said, how it will be said, when it will be said, where it will be said, and who will say it. Marketers want to make sure that the purchase response that result from a consumer decision-making also include the stages of the buyer readiness. So if you recall the 5 stages of the decision-making process, excuse me, we can actually fit it with the objectives of the communication process. So the objectives are awareness, increased knowledge, liking the product, preferring it over competition, being sure that this is the right choice, and actually making a purchase. Awareness fits very well with recognizing a need. So when we create brand awareness, we also want to explain to consumers why they need our product. Then we go to the second stage, which is information stage. The information search stage will require us to provide knowledge to our consumers. So if we promote knowledge, we need to give them all the information that they're looking for. Then if our objective is to make them like our product, we want to create positive attitude. That will fit well with the evaluating alternative stage because it will affect attitudes and beliefs. The next stage is preference. How do they know that our product is better than competition? Again, this will fall into the evaluating of alternatives and the consideration set stage in the decision-making process. And finally, how do they know that this is the right choice? Again, this will go into the final stage of making a choice of a product. And then we have the purchase, which fits with the post-purchase behavior in the decision-making model. So what kind of messages can we send out? So in general, the two general types of appeal will be rational and emotional. A rational appeal is when I explain from a rational perspective why my product is good and better. So I might create a problem and then a solution. For example, if you know the commercial for Glad trash bags, it says, "Don't get mad, get glad." So they show you where you pick up your trash and the bag actually explodes and everything falls on the ground. However, if you use Glad, the garbage will stay intact. That's a rational approach where the company explains to you that if you use their bags, which are stronger, it will be a better solution for your problem. A demonstration of the product, an infomercial, is also part of a rational approach. Product comparison. AT&T and Verizon love to do product comparison. They try to compare which one of them has better coverage, which one offers better prices. So then they will actually talk about the competition. This is sort of a dangerous method because of the fact that you actually mention the name of the brand that you don't want consumers to buy from. That kind of method mainly will be used when the underdog is comparing themselves to the leader. Usually the leader will never compare themselves to a specific brand that is doing as well as they are. And then we have testimonial. Those are commercials where we actually ask consumers to tell us, do you like a product and why? And finally, we have a slice of life. A slice of life is when we see like a picture of how our product is used. So a lot of cereal commercials, for example, use a slice of life, where they show you a breakfast table with a family eating the cereal. The other type that a lot of companies use are emotional. Emotional types will also be used when you want to grab attention and when everybody already know your product. So a lot of companies in a mature stage will actually use emotional appeals. There are a lot of ways to use emotions, but the big ones are humor, sex, image or mood, and fear. So humor will be when there's a joke that happens when the commercial is happening. So for example, at some point, Verizon used to mock the competition by showing that someone is using their cell phone and then in the middle of a sentence, the call is dropped. And because there's silence at the other end, the content of the conversation actually takes a turn. And people in the other side understand different things than what was intended. Sexual commercials are those that have beautiful women. Or for example, Old Spice commercial, where they use a very good-looking man without a shirt in order to promote their product. Image or mood are emotional commercials that wants to make you feel good. So they'll have nice music. Coke, for example, for many years worked on the idea of happiness, that when you open a bottle of Coke, happiness comes out. So they definitely used a happy mood kind of commercials when they promoted their brand. And then you have fear. Fear usually is used when you want to prevent consumers from doing something. For example, don't text and drive, or don't smoke, or maybe have an insurance for your car. They're usually not as effective as people don't like to feel negative emotions, but sometimes they're the only way to explain why a product is necessary. Now, what are the types of advertising that we have? So one is informative advertising. This is when we introduce a new product category and we wanted to build a new demand. So that will happen in the introduction stage of the life cycle. This will be when we know that consumers are in the second stage of the decision-making process and they're looking for more information. Comparative advertising, directly or indirectly, meaning we mention the brand or we just say other companies, will happen when we are in the growth stage and consumers are in the evaluative stage of the decision making, and they need to understand why are we different and better than competition. Then we have persuasive advertising. Persuasive advertising are there to persuade you that their brand is better. So this will be the conviction stage. It will be in this choice, in the evaluation stage, where you want to make the choice of the product. And that will also be usually in the growth and the mature stage. And then we have reminder advertising. Reminder advertising is when products need to be reminded that they exist. For example, you might say Twix or Snickers, they're very mature products. I love them, but I forgot they exist. I haven't eaten one in a long time. And then I see a commercial and I'm like, oh yes, I forgot how much I liked Snickers. Next time I'm in the supermarket, I will get one. So this will be a reminder advertising. So here is a nice illustration that shows you the product life cycle in relation to informative, persuasive, and reminder ads. So as you can see, persuasive can work throughout the life cycle of the product. Informative, though, is much better and more effective when you are in the first stages of introduction and growth. Reminder, on the other hand, is much more effective between maturity and decline. The final material that I want to say here are what we call a push strategy versus a pull strategy. A push strategy is when the promotional efforts come from the company and they are pushing the product toward the consumer. A pull strategy is when the promotion is toward the end consumer and we want to make sure that the end consumer comes and asks for the product. So Coke, for example, promote the product directly to the consumer. So they expect the consumer to come to a supermarket and say, hey, do you have Coke? So that will be a pull strategy. A push strategy, on the other hand, is when you go to a department store and you see, as you enter, a big display of a specific brand with discounts. It usually will be their private label. So that will be a push strategy, where the company or the retailer are trying to push the product on the consumer.